Today is Saturday, December 24th. On this Christmas Eve, we are taking a break from the serious headlines and focusing only on positive news stories that resonated with audiences this year. The founder of Good and creator of the Goodnewspaper, Branden Harvey, joins us once again for what's become an annual year in review here. If you're not familiar, Good is an independent media company focused on the good in the world. So today, we are talking about how to seek out more good news each day and even how to become the good news in our own lives. Plus, Branden shares some of the most popular stories from Good's website and social media as we celebrate the good of 2022. Welcome to the Newsworthy Special Edition Saturday, when we sit down with a different expert or celebrity every Saturday to talk about something in the news. Don't forget to tune in every Monday through Friday for our regular episodes, where we provide all the day's news in 10 minutes. I'm Erica Mandy. It's now time for today's Special Edition Saturday. Branden, thank you so much for coming back on the Newsworthy.
Oh my goodness, it's so fun to be back. Thank you for having me.
So for anyone who's not familiar yet, what made you want to start Good, and what do you hope that it provides for people?
There is this beautiful quote from our beloved Mr. Rogers, where he said, when I was a boy and I would see scary things in the news, my mother would say to me, look for the helpers. You will always find people who are helping. And I've always been really drawn to that quote. I've always been a big Mr. Rogers fan. And the reality is there's a lot of heartbreaking things that happen in the world. And so we just wanted to be a platform where we could share stories of those helpers and then inspire people to join in and become helpers themselves.
And, you bring up the scary news. A survey from Reuters found the number of people who actively avoid news coverage, either sometimes or often, has risen all over the world. And, a very common reason for this, the survey found, was that people feel the news brings down their mood. And I know it's important to you to recognize that paying attention to good news doesn't necessarily mean you aren't paying attention to what else is going on in the world. So how do you like to find that balance?
Yeah, so I very intentionally make sure that I am actively being a news consumer every day. So I'm paying attention to the things happening in the world. It does affect my mood. I think that's such a valid thing. But I think that the most helpful thing is to remember those words from Mr. Rogers and just say, okay, this news story is affecting me. It's making me feel a little bit heavy. I wonder if there's somebody making a difference for this. I wonder if there's a nonprofit that's getting involved with this issue. I wonder if there are some leaders who have some hopeful progress that they've made in the fight against this. And I just feel so lucky that my job is getting to do that and to help people find those stories.
I know that we've talked about it before, that we also try to find, a balance in our episodes here at the Newsworthy. But why do you think that it can feel rare to hear good news, or that we often feel so bombarded with bad news all the time?
There's this really interesting neuroscience around just how our brains work, where our brains have evolved to have this internal negativity bias. And it goes back years and years and years of our brains needing to pay attention to danger to stay safe. But, now the danger that we hear about is through our screen and oftentimes thousands and thousands of miles away, but our brain doesn't really realize that. And so it really pays attention to that and it sits with it in a really uncomfortable way, while the good things that we see just aren't as necessary for our brains. So we have to work a little bit harder to pay attention to that good and to absorb it in the same way that the bad happens.
Is it easier for you to find more good news around the holidays? Are people doing more good during the holiday season?
I think so. I think that there's always been this tradition of saying, how can I give back, during the holidays? How can I look back on my year, look ahead at what the future can be, and how can I make sure that I'm creating a better 2023 than there was 2022?
Is there a theme of the types of good news that you see around the holidays?
Throughout the year, we see a lot of stories of people getting involved by supporting a nonprofit through a donation, or by advocating for something that they care about, or maybe even calling their elected officials or something like that. But towards the end of the year, there is definitely an increase in the people who are actively volunteering with nonprofits in person, who are putting together care kits for people experiencing homelessness, just these practical ways where you can physically get involved, which, I don't know, it kind of feels like an interesting difference because, of course, that opportunity is available year round. But I think it's the time that we have. And also, all of those things can be done communally, and it's a really cool way to connect with others in alignment with your values.
So let's talk about some of the top good news stories of the year. What were some of the most popular stories on your website and on your social media in 2022?
So one of the first stories that really popped off on our website is this beautiful story of a binational park being built on the U.S.-Mexico border. The community of Laredo, Texas was concerned about a border wall being built that would essentially cut off their community from the community's main water source. And so this really diverse group of veterans, faith leaders, teachers, students, indigenous leaders, and landowners basically worked together to kind of cancel the construction in their community. And then once that was successful, they proposed to use all of that space to create this binational park that would essentially span 6.3 miles. It would help with conservation efforts along the river, and it would connect these two border communities on each side of the river. And it's really cool to see how much community support there was for this. They actually just got approved for $2 million in federal funding to bring this to life. I really just think it's this story of togetherness, of bringing together two countries, bringing together a really diverse group of people within this community, and also bringing people together with nature.
Okay, let's do maybe a top three. Do you have a second story for us? Because I love these.
Yes. One huge trend that we saw this year was just how many people are engaging with good news around climate change. People really engage with it. They share it. And I think it's because it helps all of us feel really hopeful about the kind of work that we can all do and the kind of work that I think that we're all going to get to be a part of in our lifetime to help combat climate change and to make the world a healthier, greener place. And I've got to shout out just one story in particular that really captivated people this year, which was Yvon Chouinard, the CEO and founder of Patagonia, this year announced that he was giving away his wealth and his company. I remember listening to that episode on the Newsworthy, and I think it was just such a creative and clever way to continue to use his company to make a difference that it really stood out to a lot of people. And that was absolutely one of our top stories of the entire year.
Third top popular story of 2022.
I think it would be hard to talk about 2022 without talking about the devastation happening in Ukraine this year. We saw an influx of people saying, is there any hope to be found? What kinds of resistance efforts are being done? How can I help? And one of the big problems happening in Ukraine is that a lot of homes have been destroyed. And so this organization, Move Ukraine, worked together with all kinds of people, from architects and engineers to local business owners to just everyday Ukrainians, to build housing for people as we head into the cold winter months. They, I think most remarkably, are using rubble just straight off the ground to build shelters that will house families and communities. And also, I think one thing that was really compelling, they shared this story in the article about this architecture firm in Washington State that dug into these archival documents from World War II era on how to build shelters with minimal materials and rubble. And from afar, they basically helped communities build homes using these old documents. And so it's this ragtag effort that is paying huge dividends for people who need shelter. And it's been really beautiful to see this story take on a life of its own and see people join in and support the organization as well. It's just really special to me whenever I see somebody using their specific talents and skills to make a difference.
Still ahead, what small steps can we all take to bring about more good in the world, and how to avoid feeling overwhelmed by all the options to help? Plus, Branden shares his personal favorite story of the year and what he's most hopeful about as we approach 2023. But first, let's take a quick break to thank our sponsors. The Newsworthy is brought to you by BetterHelp. Ever been through a big life change and wish you had a user manual to help you navigate it all? I know I have. I remember starting this very podcast and business, and the first year or two especially came with a lot of uncertainty. Well, now I'm navigating parenting for the first time. And while friends, family, or the internet may be well-intentioned, sometimes you need a professional to say the thing you actually need to hear. Whether it's a big transition in life or just a feeling that you're stuck or something else is bothering you, therapists are trained to help you figure it all out in a way that's truly helpful. And as the world's largest therapy service, BetterHelp has matched 3 million people with professionally licensed and vetted therapists available 100% online. Plus, it's affordable. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to match with a therapist. If things aren't clicking, you can easily switch to a new therapist anytime. It couldn't be simpler. No waiting rooms, no traffic, no endless searching for the right therapist. Learn more and save 10% off your first month at betterhelp.com/newsworthy. That's betterhelp, HELP.com/newsworthy. And thanks to our other sponsor, the Moms and Murder podcast. When you hear the word Chippendales, the first thing that comes to mind is probably an image involving, well, bow ties. What probably doesn't come to mind is homicide. But I recently learned on the Moms and Murder podcast that there is in fact a dark history behind the infamous brand, a history involving bad business dealings, jealousy, and yes, murder. And it is interesting, but it's not just sensational stories like that hosts Melissa and Mandy are skilled at delivering. They also bring a compassionate take to some of the lesser-known stories and help to share information about unsolved cases, as well as sharing ways anyone can get involved to help. Be advised, though, that Moms and Murder is undergoing a name change, so ring in the new year with the new title, Moms and Mysteries, highlighting a real crime every Tuesday. So subscribe to Moms and Murder. Simply search their name on whatever app you're listening on right now. Just open your podcast app of choice, type in Moms and Murder, then hit subscribe. That's Moms and Murder, soon to be Moms and Mysteries, anywhere you listen to podcasts. Okay, now back to my conversation with Branden Harvey. I'm curious if you have your own personal favorite story of 2022, or just one that's really stood out to you.
Over the last few years, I have come to deeply love and appreciate singer Harry Styles. Back in May of this year, Harry pledged to donate over $1 million to the gun violence prevention nonprofit Everytown. And it was really fun to just see him use his platform in that way to help save lives. And then around Election Day this year, he set a single day voter registration record with the nonprofit headcount by helping register folks to vote at his concerts and online using his platform. And so for me, it's just so fun to get to see one of my favorite pop stars making a difference. And the fact that me and my team get to report on that is icing on the cake.
We did, as part of our Feel Good Friday segments here on the Newsworthy, every week we talk about a good news story. And we found the most popular one on our Instagram was about a Little League baseball player who got hit in the head with a ball. He was fine, but he could tell that the pitcher felt bad about it. So he stopped the game and went up to the pitcher who had accidentally hit him in the head to give him a hug. And there was this really adorable moment of empathy and sportsmanship. And the original video of it went viral. And it was also really popular on our Instagram. And so I love to just kind of bring up that was, why was that the one that got so much attention? What do you think it is about that story or stories like it that becomes so popular and makes people want to share it?
First of all, that is just so cute and so sweet. And I can't wait to go watch that video. And I think that's a really good question. I think there is something special about this metaphor of two players being on opposite teams and finding a way to connect and come together. And also just seeing somebody in pain and finding a way to show them a sense of care and empathy and connection, I think is really special. So I think there's a few metaphors built right into that video, but also who doesn't love a cute baseball related video?
Yeah. And we got comments too about how, we can all learn something from these kids. What's your advice for people? Because I know you talk a lot about not just paying attention to the good news, but also being the good news in your own life. So what's your advice for people who want to seek out more good news and also be more of the good news in their own lives?
I don't think it's important that everybody gets involved with every single issue, but I think we all have an opportunity to get involved in issues that tug at our heartstrings. So for me, when I read something in the news that breaks my heart, I do look for an opportunity to get involved. And I think that the most important thing is not to figure out the perfect action step, but to just find one action step. So, for example, when I think about Ukraine, I know that there's not a lot that I can do from across the world, but I can find a wonderful nonprofit that provides housing and I can make a small donation, or I can just share a news story about somebody working to create a solution. And from there, once you do that thing, I find that it's a slippery slope in the best way possible, where you do something and you recognize that what you did made a difference and can genuinely help people. And then your brain just starts going wild, looking for more ways to get involved and make a difference. And before you know it, you are making a bigger difference than you ever thought you could. And so start small and start with what your heart is drawn to.
Yeah, and I imagine reading more about some of these good news and good actions will inspire people to do more as well.
Absolutely. Every good news story is an example of somebody making a difference, and you can either join them or you can support them on their journey.
What are you most hopeful about in 2023?
I really, really feel hopeful about the opportunity to increase a sense of empathy between people. I think people are a little bit burnt out on divisiveness, and I think we're starting to see a little bit of a change in just some of the tone in which people speak to one another, some of the ways that people create harm against marginalized communities. There will obviously still be a number of significant stories, I'm sure, in 2023 about that not being the case. But I do think that there's a lot of opportunity for change, and we've already begun to see it.
Final thought or takeaway as we wrap up 2022 and start the new year when it comes to good news?
The truth is, there is a lot of bad news in the world, but there is even more good news in the world. And sometimes it's hard to see it. Sometimes it's hard to find it. But the good news is always there. And if we're all a little bit more intentional about seeking it out, we will find it. And we will feel more hopeful as a result.
Well, thank you so much to Branden Harvey for joining us here on The Newsworthy again. And check out today's episode notes on thenewsworthy.com if you want to read more about any of the stories we talked about. And be sure to get even more good news by going to goodgoodgood.co and signing up for their newsletter. You can also follow them on Instagram for more. Next Saturday, we have another year in review for you. We'll be taking a look back at a bunch of the most interesting topics from this year's dozens of special edition segments. And of course, we'll be covering the most current news for you in our regular episodes during the week. Although, a quick note, we're off this Monday for the holiday. But we'll be back in your feed on Tuesday morning with our next 10-minute daily news roundup. For now, Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, and have a great weekend.